Good morning, everyone. We've all heard the phrase, work hard and you'll succeed. But in today's fast-changing world, that's only half true. Hard work matters, but smart work wins. The difference between those who just study and those who truly learn lies not in the hours spent, but in how those hours are used. Too often, students bury themselves in books, memorizing pages they'll forget after the exam. They spend long nights studying, yet the results don't match their effort. It's a trick. Why? Because they're studying hard, not learning smart. Learning smart means understanding how your brain works, how to use time efficiently, and how to apply knowledge, not just recall it. It's about building skills that last, not cramming facts that fade. Think about this. Technology changes every year. New knowledge appears every second. So the winners of tomorrow aren't those who studied the most, but those who learned how to learn. So today, I invite you to make a shift. Don't just study for grades, learn for growth. Don't just memorize, master. Don't just work harder, work wiser. Let's explore 6 smart ways to transform the way we learn. Stop treating study material like a script. When you understand the why behind a concept, you can explain it, connect it, and use it anywhere. True learning happens when knowledge becomes a part of your thinking, not just your memory. Research shows the brain absorbs better in short bursts, around 25-40 minutes at a time. Take breaks, refresh your mind, and return. It's not about sitting for hours, but about sustained attention and mental freshness. Don't just read. Teach what you've learned, quiz yourself, or apply it to real problems. The more you engage with the content, through mind maps, flashcards, or summaries, the more deeply it stays with you. Smart learners connect lessons to everyday experiences. Physics isn't just formulas. It's in how we move, drive, and live. History isn't just dates. It's understanding human decisions. The more you connect what you learn, the more it sticks. Smart learning means planning and prioritizing. So use tools like to-do lists, Pomodoro timers, or study planners. When you manage time wisely, you create balance. Study, rest, reflect, and repeat. That's how efficiency grows. Instead of asking I need this for the exam? Ask how can this help me grow? Curiosity fuels deep learning. When you believe you can always improve, you start learning not because you must, but because you want to. The future doesn't belong to those who study the hardest. It belongs to those who learn the smartest. So, stop counting the hours you study. Start counting the ideas you master. Because in the end, smart learners don't just pass exams. They shape the world. I can also make it video script style for YouTube or presentation use. Most students believe that the more they memorize, the better they perform. They spend countless hours repeating the same lines, highlighting entire paragraphs, and trying to store pages of notes inside their heads. But here's the truth. Memorization fades. Understanding stays. When you memorize something without truly grasping its meaning, your brain treats it like short-term data, useful for an exam, but easily forgotten afterward. Real learning begins when you stop asking what is this, and start asking why is this? Understanding allows you to see the logic behind concepts, not just the surface. For example, in mathematics, instead of memorizing formulas, understand how they're formed and why they work. In science, don't just recall definitions. Explore how they apply to the real world. When you connect ideas and see patterns, your brain forms stronger neural links, making it easier to recall and apply knowledge later. Think of understanding as building a foundation. Memorization is like painting the walls. It looks good, but without a solid base, it collapses easily. Understanding helps you explain a topic in your own words, connect it with other subjects, and even teach it to someone else, which is one of the most powerful ways to learn. Smart learners invest their time in comprehending the core idea rather than copying it word for word. They visualize concepts, ask questions, and test their reasoning. When you truly understand something, you don't need to memorize. Your brain naturally remembers it because it makes sense. So instead of cramming pages of notes the night before an exam, take time to explore the meaning behind what you're learning. Ask yourself, How does this work? Why is this important? How can I apply it in real life? The moment you start thinking this way, your learning transforms from temporary memorization to lifelong knowledge. One of the biggest mistakes students make is believing that studying for long, uninterrupted hours means they're being productive. In reality, the brain doesn't work like that. Our attention span is limited. After about 30 to 40 minutes, focus naturally begins to fade. The longer we push beyond that point without rest, the less we retain. That's why studying for hours without breaks often leads to burnout, frustration, and poor memory retention. Cute. Smart learners know that quality matters more than quantity. Instead of marathon study sessions, they break their learning into shorter, highly focused intervals, typically 25 to 40 minutes, followed by short breaks of 5 to 10 minutes. This approach, often called the Pomodoro technique, allows the brain to reset, absorb, and consolidate information effectively. These small breaks refresh your mind and prevent mental fatigue, helping you return to your studies with renewed energy and sharper concentration. When you learn in focused bursts, you train your brain to give its full attention during each session. During that time, remove distractions. No phone notifications, no multitasking, no background noise. Create a quiet, organized space where your only goal is to engage deeply with the material. This focused state, sometimes called a flow, is where real learning happens. Another advantage of short study sessions is consistency. It's easier to commit to several small, manageable blocks of study throughout the day than to force yourself into one long, exhausting session. Over time, these consistent bursts add up to more effective learning and better long-term retention. Moreover, neuroscience supports this method. After each short learning session, your brain continues processing and storing information during rest. So those small breaks aren't wasted time. They're actually part of the learning process. When you come back to your study material, you'll find it easier to recall and build upon what you've already learned. So, studying smart means respecting how your brain functions best. It's not about how long you study. It's about how effectively you use your focus within that time. One of the most powerful ways to shift from studying hard to learning smart is to move from passive learning to active learning. Most students spend hours reading notes, watching lectures, or listening to teachers, but that's only half of the process. Passive learning means you're receiving information, not engaging with it. You might feel productive, but your brain is actually in a low-energy state, simply absorbing data without deeply processing it. A result. You remember less, understand less, and struggle to recall the material later. Active learning, on the other hand, turns you into a participant instead of a spectator. It's about doing something with the knowledge, explaining it, using it, or questioning it. When you actively interact with information, you move it from short-term memory into long-term understanding. That's why methods like self-quizzing, summarizing in your own words, teaching others, and solving practical problems are far more effective than rereading or highlighting. For example, after studying a science chapter, don't just reread the text. Try explaining the concept to a friend, or even to yourself out loud. When you teach, you identify gaps in your understanding and strengthen your memory at the same time. Or, if you're studying history, instead of memorizing dates, try creating a timeline or story that connects events. The brain loves stories. They make complex information easier to recall. Visual tools like mind maps, diagrams, or flashcards also help in active learning. They allow you to reorganize and represent information in creative ways, forcing your brain to think critically and make new connections. The more senses and actions involved in your study process, writing, speaking, drawing, questioning, the deeper your learning becomes. Another active learning strategy is retrieval practice, which means testing yourself frequently. Instead of looking at your notes for answers, close the book and recall everything you can. This strengthens memory recall pathways and builds confidence in what you know. The effort you put into remembering something actually makes the memory stronger. A phenomenon proven by cognitive science. In short, Active learning transforms the way your brain handles information. It changes learning from something you consume to something you create. When you engage actively, you don't just remember facts, you own them. One of the smartest ways to make learning meaningful and long-lasting is to connect what you study with real life. Too often, students treat education like a series of isolated subjects. Math here, science there, history somewhere else, without realizing that all knowledge is interconnected. When learning feels disconnected from reality, it becomes mechanical and forgettable. But when you link it to everyday experiences, it suddenly becomes alive, relevant, and easier to remember. Think about it. When you understand how something applies to your world, your brain gives it priority. For example, instead of memorizing chemical reactions, imagine them happening in your kitchen when you cook. When you see mathematics not as a list of equations, but as a tool to budget your expenses, measure ingredients, or understand technology, it stops being abstract. It becomes useful. And the moment knowledge feels useful, it sticks. This is why practical examples, stories, and experiments are so powerful. They activate both logic and emotion. When your emotions are involved, your brain releases chemicals that strengthen memory and understanding. That's why you're more likely to remember a concept explained through a real-life story than through a dry definition. Smart learners constantly ask questions like, where do I see this in my daily life? How can I use this knowledge outside the classroom? What problems can I solve with what I just learned? By doing this, you transform every lesson into an experience. For example, if you're studying environmental science, you can observe waste management in your neighborhood or plant a tree to understand sustainability firsthand. If you're learning communication skills, practice them in your conversations. This turns abstract ideas into lived knowledge. Another way to connect learning with life is through interdisciplinary thinking, combining different subjects to understand the bigger picture. History can explain social patterns that psychology studies. Science can merge with art through design and innovation. When you see how everything links together, learning becomes more holistic and creative. When knowledge connects to reality, it gains purpose. You no longer study just to pass an exam. You study to understand the world, to improve yourself, and to contribute meaningfully. And that's the kind of learning that never fades, because it's not just memorized, it's experienced. One of the biggest challenges students face today isn't a lack of intelligence. It's a lack of time management. Many people study endlessly but still feel like there's never enough time. They rush through lessons, procrastinate until the last minute, and end up overwhelmed by stress. The problem isn't that they don't have enough hours in a day. It's that they don't use their hours wisely. Smart learners understand that success doesn't come from doing everything. It comes from doing the right things at the right time. Managing time means taking control of your schedule instead of letting it control you. It starts with clear priorities. Not every task deserves the same amount of attention. Instead of spending hours on easy topics just because they're comfortable, focus on areas that truly need effort. Smart learners analyze their workload, identify what matters most, and allocate their time accordingly. This ensures that every minute contributes to progress rather than just activity. One effective strategy is planning your day or week in advance. Write down your goals, assignments, and study sessions. Having a visual plan not only organizes your time, but also gives your brain direction. Tools like planners, calendars, or digital apps can help structure your day into focus blocks for study, rest, and reflection. When you know exactly what you need to do, you save precious time wasted on indecision or distraction. Another essential part of time management is learning to break large tasks into smaller, manageable steps. Big goals can feel intimidating and cause procrastination. But when you divide them into smaller actions, like reading one chapter, solving 5 problems, or summarizing one topic, the workload feels lighter and more achievable. Each small success motivates you to move forward. Smart learners also understand the importance of balance. Effective time management isn't about studying all day. It's about making room for rest, exercise, hobbies, and personal growth. Overworking the mind without relaxation leads to burnout and reduces productivity. Taking regular breaks or scheduling leisure time isn't a waste. It's how you recharge your focus and creativity. Avoid multitasking whenever possible. Many students believe doing several things at once saves time, but in truth, it divides attention and lowers efficiency. Concentrate fully on one task, complete it, and then move on to the next. This approach strengthens concentration and helps you produce better results in less time. Lastly, managing time wisely also means being disciplined with distractions. Social media, notifications, and unnecessary conversations are time stealers. Smart learners set clear boundaries. Steps up first, reward later. They train their minds to value focus over distraction and progress over procrastination. Time is the one resource that can't be regained once it's gone. Managing it effectively is not about being busy. It's about being intentional. When you learn to organize, prioritize, and balance your time, you unlock the power to learn efficiently, stay calm under pressure, and achieve more with less effort. The final and perhaps most powerful step in learning smart is to cultivate curiosity and a growth mindset. Many students see education as a race to finish the syllabus, to get high grades, or to outperform others. But true learners know that education is not a race. It's a journey of discovery. When you are curious, learning stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like an adventure. Every lesson becomes an opportunity to explore, question, and grow. Curiosity is the spark that turns ordinary study into deep understanding. When you're genuinely interested in a topic, your brain automatically engages more deeply. You ask a why instead of just a what. You search for explanations beyond what's written in the book. You start connecting new knowledge with things you already know, building a web of understanding that lasts far longer than memorized facts ever could. Smart learners don't settle for surface-level answers. They dig deeper. They don't just want to know that something works. They want to know how and why it works. For example, instead of simply learning a scientific formula, they explore how it applies to real-world phenomena. This kind of curiosity-driven learning makes knowledge personal and powerful, and it encourages creative thinking, a skill that's essential in every area of life. Along with curiosity comes the growth mindset, the belief that intelligence and ability are not fixed, but can be developed through effort, practice, and persistence. Many people give up easily when faced with difficulty because they believe they're not smart enough. But smart learners understand that struggling with a concept doesn't mean they're failing. It means they're learning. Every mistake becomes feedback. Every challenge becomes a lesson. Change is the way you respond to setbacks. Instead of feeling discouraged, you start seeing obstacles as opportunities to improve. You begin to value progress over perfection. When you face something difficult, you remind yourself that effort is what turns potential into ability. This attitude not only builds resilience, but also makes learning more enjoyable, because you stop fearing failure and start embracing it as part of success. Curiosity and a growth mindset together create unstoppable learners. Curiosity keeps your mind open. The growth mindset keeps it strong. Together, they transform education from something you have to do into something you want to do. You no longer study for external rewards like grades or approval. You study for the internal reward of growth, knowledge, and mastery. When you stay curious and keep a growth mindset, you develop the confidence to explore beyond what's taught, to ask bold questions, and to challenge old ideas. You begin to see learning not as a phase that ends with school or college, but as a lifelong journey that continues to shape who you are and what you can become.